everybody. This is Jason with another edition of the Inked Up Runner, and tonight I'm talking with, I think it's fair to say, an ultra running legend. This guy, he has 150 ultra finishes. He is number 2 behind the legendary Speedboat in 100-mile wins. Let's see. I mean, he's always ranked in the top 10 in ultra runners in the United States, North America, whatever you might have it. He's an ultra guy like me in Gingy. He ultra spire, squirrels nut butter. I probably missed some of the people that he collaborates with, but I'm working and talking with tonight the one and only legendary Jeff Browning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So I think, I didn't want to put it in your intro, but Jeff did something pretty damn awesome a few days ago. He broke a double rim to rim. He got an FKT out there, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you did, I think, was 17 hours, 55 minutes, but 14 seconds, right?
Yes.
So this is something a little different from you, because you are, your specialty is the hundreds, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But jumping into the FKT game, what inspired you to get out there and attempt, to attempt something like this?
Well, I mean, I've always liked the idea of FKTs, just doing stuff like that, where you're put together, a little crew and go run a really cool route. And I think the aesthetics and simplicity of FKTs are kind of fun, definitely intriguing. But I was just so race centric for so many years that I just nothing really spoke to me that I really wanted to do. And so I never had really put anything together officially. And then when clock's ticking, I turned 50 last year, and I moved to Flagstaff last year as well. So, the Grand Canyon's only an hour and a half away, and South Rim's, trailheads are only hour and 30 minutes. So I started doing quite a bit of rim to rim to rim. Friends would want to come to town and do rim to rim to rim. So I'd jump in, and so I ended up in the last 18 months, I think I've done rim to rim to rim, not counting this FKT, 4 times. I've done rim to rim, and I've done rim to rim once with Peter Mortimer, where we did a car swap with another group of runners in Flagstaff. So we drove around North Rim, camped, and then ran across last fall. So, I have a fair amount of time in the canyon. I'd known about this FKT for a long time, probably 5 years, had been looking at it and kind of talking about it, but I never lived close to the Grand Canyon, and I'd never run rim to rim. I just knew that it was an aesthetic route. I thought it was really cool, and I thought it was a cool idea to do it 2 times versus the 1 time. And obviously you can't touch Jim Walmsley's time. No. So I actually ran into Jim about 2 weeks ago downtown. My wife and I were grabbing a coffee, and we were walking across the street, and Jim came up on his bike, and he was getting ready to head out to Europe. And we were chatting, and we were talking about, I think he was racing Madeira on Saturday. So we were kind of racing and peaking at the same time. We're talking about training, and I told him what I was going after. And I said, you ran so fast. My age, I can't even get close to that time. So I've got to do it twice, to try to get something. So I just have to make it way longer, way harder. But I think I just aesthetically, it just really spoke to me that, and I know it now after being on it a lot in the last 18 months. So that was kind of like the catalyst that really, I was just waiting for that specific route that spoke to me. And the canyon's amazing. If anybody's ever done rim to rim, how cool it is. And I don't know, the idea of doing it twice was kind of cool and a little mind boggling at the same time. But But it ended up being awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome, and and I guess when you think about something of that magnitude, there's a lot of planning involved. When you think about planning an FKT, and you already answered a question that I was going to ask you, because I was going to ask you, when you're choosing an FKT, are you choosing it to chase the actual FKT, or are you choosing it because the course spoke to you in a particular way? And obviously this course spoke to you in a
Yeah,
particular
it's a little
way.
of both. At least for me, it's both. You're obviously chasing the time. It needs to be attainable, or at least in your head that you think you can attain that time. But like if I look at Jim's time for the rim to rim, there's like no way I'm running 5:55.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's just insane. But for that rate, for that thing, yes, it definitely speaks to me. I mean, I love being in the canyon, and there's so many good trails there, but just the basic rim to rim route is amazing.
So, when you're planning for something like this, I guess how much different well, is it much different than planning? Because look, I'm not getting an FKT unless it's running to the bathroom here in my house or something. But like when you're planning something like this, how is it similar or not similar for you in preparation for 100? Like, from a crewing standpoint, from an aid standpoint, how much different was it preparing for something of this magnitude compared to when you're going out and knocking out one of your hundreds?
Well, I mean, going after supported FKT, obviously part of the allure of supported is you get to put together your own little posse of people that you like and that you get along with and are willing to do this crazy stuff, right? Like I had to have guys that were willing to put on a light pack, and pack down in the dark before I started to be at Manzanita and to be at Phantom Ranch. That's not an easy hike to go into. So you need ultra runners who are friends that are willing to do that and love adventure for the sake of it, the adventure and hanging out in the canyon and doing it. So, and helping you along. I mean, supported FKTs, that's the one thing I kind of really I bought them all steak dinners, everybody on the crew, steak dinners afterwards. And I got up the next morning and a bunch of guys were camping, and I went to the camp and like cooked them breakfast. I set up my own tent trailer as a base camp for them. And I cooked them, bacon and eggs and steak and steak and eggs, and the next day as well, because I feel like one thing that you don't see is like the behind the scenes for something like this. Yeah. So I ran 17:55, but I couldn't have done that time without that support. It would have been a lot slower with me having to fill my own waters if I would have done it, say, self-supported, for example. And so to do something fast like that, you have to have that support. So having people willing to go down into it, that's where the logistics are a little trickier. I guess it depends on the route, especially, but the Grand Canyon is not accessible. So I only had my family at South Rim, and I had friends down in two water stops in the bottom of the canyon. And then I had another friend here from a new friend, actually got introduced through this whole process through another friend, another running friend, Buck Blankenship, here in town, here in Flagstaff, that paced me the second lap. And basically I was looking for someone who could help me get through those, who was strong enough runner that could help me get through the water stops and not get dropped, and be able to like run a GoPro. And because we were making a small documentary film, like 3 to 5 minute documentary film on it. And so I needed someone that could do that. And so anyway, getting all those people together, I think the logistics are similar to 100 in that you have to plan, your all your nutrition, just like you plan drop bags, basically. And I had to plan through all that. I had my normal spreadsheet with like crew notes and splits or at least projected splits and of what I thought I could do. Yeah, so it's not much different than 100. Just depending on the route, it might be less accessible. So there was a lot of, my two of my crew guys that backpacked in covered 34 miles that day, and on foot, and the other guys and Buck did rim to rim as a training run. Luckily, he's 3 weeks out from Cruel Jewel, so he needed a training run anyway, so it was good for him. He was willing to do it. So that's the great thing about ultra runners. If they've got a big race coming up, they're like, yeah, I'll pace you for 43 miles and surge ahead and run a GoPro. It's like, that's great training. So
absolutely, right?
yeah, most people look at you like you're crazy. I'm not doing that for you.
Well, I mean, let's face it, Cruel Jewel is that race is no joke, right? I mean here in the South, you could argue Cruel Jewel is one of the toughest races here in the South, right?
Yep.
I know there's that one. I think Cloud Splitter is pretty tough, and then there's another one. Hellbender. I'm about to go crew a buddy out at Hellbender. In a couple weeks. He just finished running Scar. That was his training run for Hellbender. So
cool.
So awesome. So anyway, when you look at that, and this is a little bit different than 100-miler because you're racing an imaginary person, right? So how much different is it racing an imaginary person? They're there, you can't see them, but you're trying to beat them. How much harder is that than racing somebody who is physically chasing you?
Well, it's obviously it's easier to get motivated when someone's chasing you. So you got to find that mental place you can go to push when you can't, when you don't have that competition, right? I mean, the coolest thing about rim to rim, it's a popular route. We did it on a Friday, which is a big day for people to do rim to rim. So people travel from all over. There were probably 20 plus people doing rim to rim that day. So there was a ton of people on the route. A lot of them knew what I was doing. And by the end of the day, word had spread to like backpackers and people at Phantom Ranch and people camping at the campground. So people were like hanging out like at the creek as you're running right by the campground after you leave Phantom Ranch and head back down to the river, and people were yelling and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of cool to have that kind of support, like emotionally, and that gives you a little bit of juice for sure. As far as running the time, like I'm really good at running based on my own splits and running my own races, even in hundreds, and I'm pretty good at like closing a lot. So, running hard at the end and pushing myself. So I didn't have a problem finding that place to go. It was pretty easy. And I had, my wife's a good motivator as well. We've been married almost 25 years. Next week, we'll be married 25 years is our anniversary. So she knows me really well. We've known each other since we were 18 and 21. So she sent me a text the night before that just said, go get it. And so I had that in my head, especially on the last climb up South Kaibab, because it's, a huge climb, last 7 miles or 6.3 miles. And I knew I needed to kind of even split to break 18. I kind of got it in my head, like probably on the second lap that I was going to be really close to had a shot at sub 18. And so that was an awesome motivator. I'm really good at being motivated by time. So even in hundreds, when I'm like, not in a podium chase, even, like something like Hardrock last year, I got 5th, but I was motivated to get under 27 hours. So I ran hard at the end. And I'm always motivated for those little time goals. So that helped.
Oh, absolutely. So, just running through and reading some of your posts, how, just, I guess we can do a quick breakdown of how it went for you. So weather-wise, how did the weather shake out for you during the run?
Well, as the forecast unfolded in the last week, we actually had a discussion about moving it a day because there was, it was first like 20, and then it was 30, then it was 40, then it was 50 to 60% chance of rain showers and or snow showers, depending on time of day and where, on the rim or down in the canyon. And even some thunderstorms in the afternoon, meaning lightning. So there was a forecast. So as that unfolded in the week, it looked like basically a semi-weak front was coming through just on Friday during the day. So it was like, oh man, it's sunny at this place every single day, and I'm gonna get like a bad weather day. On the one day I pick, right? And we put all these logistics together of guys coming down from Utah and, friends and a video crew. So finally, I think on like Sunday, the week before, I was just like, you know what? I think it'll be fine. It's going to be fine. Let's just do it. And in hindsight, it was the best day you could have had weather-wise, because normally the canyon can be really hot down in the canyon on the river and around Phantom Ranch and up to Manzanita, so through Cottonwood and all that. And it can just be baking down in there. And that definitely slows you down. You have to drink more water, all that kind of stuff. So that you're dealing with like, heat more. And it ended up being like the best running weather ever, because it was windy. We had 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts up on the rim. We had snow flurries. We had a little bit of rain showers. There was more sprinkles. Only once I had to put on a rain jacket for like 5 minutes. It kind of rained hard for a second. And then it was like, oh, I'm out, and took it off again. The rest of the time, we just had some light sprinkles. We did hear one crack of lightning coming down off of North Rim the second time, but we were already went down low. And I looked at Buck and I'm like, I'm glad we're descending, because we weren't still going up higher. But other than that, like, we had great weather. It was kind of partly sunny. We had sun breaks, but a lot of overcast that day. It was gnarly for my family and crew up on South Rim because they were freezing. Like, we got there and everybody was cold, down coats on. It was super windy. We literally stayed there less than 5 minutes after I finished because it was so cold in the evening. So, but other than that, I mean, the weather was absolutely amazing for running, and it was nice the night before. So it was clear overnight. I started at midnight. So I had about a 55% moon. There's a little bit of haze in the sky. We have some forest fires, so there is a little haze in the canyon right now, just because we have like 3 regional big fires. But other than that, it was great weather for running.
So it sounds like you had great weather, which we all know when you're trying to do something like this, weather can make or break, an attempt like this. So that went well for you. Throughout the whole thing, did you really have any huge lows or anything that hit you that you thought, damn, this is a setback I've got to pull out of at any point? Or was it just...
No, the only thing we had was a little, so we had to have some evolve some crew plans on the fly down in the canyon based on, we thought, one of my buddies was training hard, but then got sick in the peak training for this. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the guys that was going to crew, and he was going to he wanted to run with me. And so he was planning on crewing at Phantom Ranch and running with me up to Manzanita 10 miles, and then waiting for me to tag North Rim in the night, and then crew me in the morning back down to Phantom and run with me. And as soon as I came through, within 2 miles, he was off the back. And so I just had to crew myself. I just waited for him to catch up. I grabbed my calories. I just had a little Ziploc of calories. I said, give me my calories. Boom, I'm out. And I kept rolling. and I crewed myself through there. And then by that time he'd gotten up there and was able to crew me through when I came back down. And then he was able to roll with me on the downhill because it's 2,000 feet of downhill over 10 miles or 9 miles. So he rolled with me back down to Phantom Ranch, no problem. But the uphill he was not able to hang. So that was like, we had to do a quick, like, okay, we're going to do that. And then, you know, we had to switch plans a little bit on the fly, but that's part of like these things, you know, you got to be able to like just roll with the punches. So you can't get too freaked out about that stuff. That was really it. I mean, one time everybody keeps asking me, did I have any lows? And I really didn't. I only had like, I mean, I really, you know how to take care of myself as far as hydration and, you know, electrolytes and all that stuff. And so, and effort, and I controlled my effort. So in the first lap, so I would have more in the second lap. And so I had one moment in the end of, like, as I was getting to the climb to go up South Kaibab on the first lap, where I was like, man, I still got to go back across this canyon again. I had that thought and I just quickly pushed it away and was like, I was just like, you got to get to the rim, just get to the rim and turn around and go back, you know, like, don't think about it right now. And then once I was on the second half, I was just really focusing on every section I could run well. You know, you got to get through the really technical cobblestones and the wash logs and not eat it. And there's rebar sticking up in spots and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So you're just trying to get through the technical sections without messing up. And then any runnable section I was trying to leverage. So on the second half, so I was very focused on that.
Yeah, I mean,
for lap two.
Just listening to you, I mean, I knew when I asked you this question what your answer was going to be, because when you watch your posts and see your videos, it seemed like you were just on automatic. I mean, just, you know, it's funny when when you see attempts like this and watch people do things like this, you can look at a person and see the demeanor of their face and see how they're looking and how they're running and their gait and how they're, you know, how their whole posture is. And you could just tell either they're struggling or they're cruising. And you look like you were on freaking cruise control, like every time a video was shot. And I thought that was like, and that's just amazing, because like, you know, to be able to hold that for that long on a course like that, I mean, that's awesome. But I mean, that's no different than kind of what you do a lot. So when we talk about these FKTs and you just notched this one under your belt, you know, what's next for you? I mean, are you looking at knocking out some more FKTs? Are you going to do a Karl Meltzer special on the AT or something like that? Are we going to see something like that?
I don't have time to do, like, take a summer to do the AT. Carl's been trying to get me to go after the AT record. He said, I'll be your crew. But I don't know. I don't know if I got that kind of bandwidth. I would have to figure out, like, logistically with family and business, my coaching business, and how I would be gone for 40 some days or whatever it is now, 40 days. So, you know, I am looking at FKTs that are shorter than that, you know, 10 days or less.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a couple in my head that I've kind of bounced around. You know, the Colorado Trail is definitely on my radar. I think the supported or the unsupported loop of the Wonderland Trail around Rainier is another one that I've kind of tinkered with in my head. So, and I do good at, like, being self-supported as well. So I'm kind of intrigued by doing something without support as well. So I don't know. I got a few ideas. I'm starting to think like maybe I need to mix in an FKT a couple times a year, on top of racing, just for something different.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it challenges you in a different way. I mean, and you remember out here on the East Coast, we have the Pinhoti. There's an FKT out there on the Pinhoti, and then you could always go out and go after Scar. I mean, I don't know if you've ever ran Scar, but that's a
No, what is that route?
that is the Appalachian Trail portion of in Tennessee. So you start at Fontana Dam, where it's on the border there at Bryson City, North Carolina, and you start at Fontana, and you run all the way through the Smoky Mountains, and you end at Davenport Gap. So you basically run from one border to the next.
You know what the mileage is on that section?
72.
Oh, cool.
And so the guy who owns it is a local guy who lives out there. His name is Luke Boschwaller, and I've interviewed him, and he has like a monster time out there. That what makes that a challenging trail is there's only two really good crew access points, and the only other way to get crew is to do what you did and have somebody hike in to meet you, because there's no really good access points. But
right.
It is it's stunning, and it's beautiful out there. Like I said, my buddy just did it. He had been chasing it now. I think this was his third attempt and just knocked it out. And it's cool. It's awesome. We have people come from all over and run Scar out here in Tennessee, because it's such a big such a big trail. So I guess, one thing you hit on earlier is, just how how to take care of yourself. How do what do you credit your longevity to? I mean, you're still winning 100 milers. You're going out breaking FKTs, just like it ain't nobody's business. Is there something particular? Because I know when I interviewed Peter Mortimer, I was looking at his 200 times, and he cut 24 hours off of his from one 200 miler to the next. And I said, how in the hell did you cut a full day off of a race? And he basically broke down he changed the whole way he ate, right? And broke that down for me. So is there something that you credit to your health, your ability to perform, your longevity to be able to get out there and do what you do?
Well, I think like Pete, I'm similar in the way we eat. We both are kind of, loosely high fat, low carb, or I would say it's more animal based, animal centered diet with a lot of fruit. At least that's the way I eat. It's probably what you'd almost call carnivore 2.0, which is like, a lot of animal-based products at every meal, like centered around eggs and raw dairy and lots of red meat, and fatty cuts of meat, ribeyes and T-bones and full-fat hamburger and that kind of stuff, lamb chops. And I eat, I eat chicken as well and fish, and I kind of try to do a little bit of everything and mix it up. But that's probably my biggest change in the last, if I look at my career of 22 years in ultra running, in beginning of 2016 or into 2015, I changed my diet to kind of start tinkering with kind of a high fat, low carb approach. And there's a lot of misinformation about low carb in ultra running. So everyone thinks I'm a keto athlete or I'm eating ketogenic diet, and I'm not. I do use a ketogenic diet occasionally where, my carbs are that traditional 50 grams or less a day. But most of the time, I would define low carb as 20 to 200 grams of carbs a day. And most of my carbs, I'm usually over 100 grams of carbs a day, somewhere between 100 and 200. But most of that's coming from fruit or starch like potatoes, and a little bit of vegetables. So, I used to eat a ton more veggies and a little bit of fruit. Now I eat a lot more fruit and a little bit of veggies. So that's kind of like how I approach it. And I think that one, what I've witnessed and what the athletes I coach to this, which has been a huge cohort of athletes at this point, and most of them are older athletes, so 40, 50, 60 some years old. What I see over and over and over again is the lack of inflammation that happens and the recovery that happens on this approach. It's way different. There's just it's almost like I would almost consider it an anti-inflammatory diet, because the inflammatory response after big efforts are so low. And I think, and people notice it because a lot of the athletes I coach might be 50 or 60 years old. They've been running ultras for 15, 20 years. They have a lot of ultras under their belts, and they have a lot of high carb running under their belt, traditional kind of carbohydrates approach, that 60+% of your macros. And I think that piece, that's something that kind of gets swept under the rug when we're talking about it. But I think that's a huge piece of this, is that we see runners just recovering so much faster. And they're coming to me and going, Jeff, I at 63, I didn't know I could recover this fast. I thought it was gone. I thought that aspect of like recovery was gone based on my age, and I'm realizing it was all diet. And so I think that's a big piece for me personally. Now that I'm 50, you definitely have more aches and pains, and you don't recover as fast as you used to. And the diet helps that. It helps turn back the clock a little bit. And then also, and I still use simple carbs on race day. And this FKT, I had a lot of goo octane and a lot of gels, and chocolate truffles is one of my treats. The little balls that come in a little wrapper and has oh man, those are if you forget those are in your pack and you go, oh, I still have one.
Oh, those things are amazing.
Yeah. So that's one. I think that for longevity, I would say nutrition's number one. Number two is mobility and strength. I mean, I definitely prioritize mobility and strength. I do pretty much almost something 5 of 7 days a week, some kind of strength and mobility work. Whether it's like air squats, side lunges, forward deep knee lunges, heel raises, stuff like that, push-ups, pull-ups, core work. I do that pretty much 4 or 5 days a week. And at least 1 or 2 of those days, I add dumbbells in, especially for lower body, for strength. So like deadlifts, Bulgarian split squats, goblet squats, stuff like that. So I do a fair amount of strength training still. That keeps muscle mass as you age. After 40 especially, you really lose muscle mass naturally every year, and you get your protein intake needs to go up and your strength training needs to go up, both. So you can just maintain body mass or muscle mass and not lose it. So that's one. And other than that, like those are the main things. I still train about the same amount of miles I have last 7 or 8 seasons. I hover around the same volume every year. I haven't changed a lot of stuff. I still am motivated to train hard. I still do a lot of vert. I still do some quality work, as far as speed work and, tempo and steady state work. So I still am motivated to do those things and train hard. So I think that helps as well. That's the secret sauce, I guess.
So speaking of longevity, and it's funny, you mentioned the strength training, because I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was talking about I was going to be talking with you, and we were talking, and the person said his strength training program is amazing what he does. And so apparently, it's pretty well known that you have a pretty solid strength training, and that makes sense because I guess that keeps you from breaking down and get injured as much if you're taking care of keeping everything on you held together, if that makes sense. And so I think you hit on something there that I think a lot of people, like at my age, because I'm 45, I'm not doing any strength training. I just go out and run. I typically don't get injured, but at the same time, I wonder how much better I would do if I incorporated some sort of strength training. So when you do your strength training, do you typically, like you do an hour a day, 30 minutes a day? Like how much volume do you put in per,
It's short. I mean, I have a thing which you can look up on Ultra Running Magazine's website, that you can get an idea of kind of a similar what I do. It's evolved over the years a little bit, but it's very similar still. Called Tough 21. It's 21 minutes. It's 45 seconds to do an exercise, and then you have 15 seconds to switch to the next one, and it's timed, so you're just in and out. You don't have to count how many you do in that 45 seconds. You just concentrate on form. And so that's one. I do that at least once a week. I do Tough 21. I've been doing that for a lot of years now, consistently. I also do body weight exercises. That's what when I say 4 or 5 days a week, 1 or 2 of those has weights and the rest are body weight. So it's like push-ups. I basically do 60 push-ups, 30 pull-ups, and 120 core exercises. So 30 of 4 different things, like planks, dead bugs, oblique presses, stuff like that. And then, and I'm doing that 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, even last week before the FKT, I did that routine of it's 30 air squats, 30 side lunges, 30 deep knee lunges, forward lunges, and from the knees over toes guy, if you guys follow him on YouTube, go check him out. I do that forward knee lunge, and then 30 heel raises, rocking heel raises. So you're like this on your feet, up and back and up and back. And then what's the other one? Step back lunge with a high knee hold. So you're doing like a hold at the top to engage your glutes. So engage single glute on one leg. I do that, and push-ups, 60 push-ups, 30 pull-ups, and the 4 core exercises. I did that 3 days last week. I did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, before I attempted on Friday. And then I did another session yesterday to get my 4 in, because I had a 4 of 7 day challenge on Strava in my private Strava group for my coached athletes that I do every week. On Sunday nights, I post either a 4 of 7 days or 5 of 7 days, where you have to do the base body weight only exercise. I call it Giddy Up 12 because it's 12 exercises, the one I just told you about. Mm-hmm. And then you can substitute strength or weighted strength instead, but you have to complete, bare minimum, you have to do that body weight thing 5 of 7 days or 4 of 7 days. So since it was an FKT week, I made it an off week with 4 of 7 days, but normally it's 5 of 7 days. Like this week is 5 of 7 days again. So I just posted last night, and we're going to do 5 of 7 days this week. And I usually have, 4, 5, 6 athletes that jump into that every week. And we check in on the comments and just say, day 1 done, Giddy Up 12, or day 2 done, substitute Tough 21. And so that keeps me accountable as an athlete. I'm the coach, so I feel like I have to show up every week and do it. And then that keeps my athletes accountable that want to do strength and want to stay on their strength. And I really see a huge benefit in the consistency of it, and also the mobility piece of it. And I think that's one thing to point out, that strength training really, it's strength, quote, you're going to use the word strength. It's really putting the muscle under a load. So with weights. But I would also say, that's why I say strength and mobility. I always include mobility in listing it, because the air squats and side lunges are really not really strength work, they're mobility work, because it's just body weight. So really what you're doing is you're making yourself do mobility work 5 of 7 days, which I really, once you get used to it, it's easy to knock out 30 air squats and 30 side lunges and that kind of stuff. But you start to get to the point where you realize how it keeps your hips open and it keeps your range of motion open. Mm-hmm. And as we age, especially, and this plays back to the mobility piece, is that the mobility piece of this is that hold on, I got a dog and I'm home alone. I got a dog that wants outside.
Oh no, you're fine. Go ahead.
Can we pause?
Oh yeah, you're all good.
Okay, where were we? Oh,
you're the mobility.
Yeah, so I think the mobility piece, I think the one thing that ultra runners, older ultra runners or aging ultra runners need to keep in mind is that we lose our range of motion over time naturally. No matter if you're exercising or not, you're gonna lose range of motion if you don't. The old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it, is kind of true. So I really stress this, especially with my 40 plus athletes, is that you have to prioritize mobility and strength both. Those two pieces are paramount in your longevity. And I'll give you a real world example. Everyone will understand this as a trail runner and ultra runner. When you're running down the trail, you're cruising down 10-minute pace and you kick a rock or a root and you're going 10-minute pace to 5-minute pace, trying not to face plant. Mm-hmm. That's when those mobility sessions are gonna come in handy, because the person who's been doing mobility work is probably gonna 9 out of 10 times is gonna be able to pull out of that almost face plant, maybe put a hand down and be able to like really pull out of it with that long, like overreaching stride that you're not used to doing. Mm-hmm. But the person who's not is going to kiss dirt, and they're probably going to have cuts, bruises, maybe hospital trip. So that's where it comes in the most handy, is in those times when you have to do crazy range of motion and you're not ready for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've been that person flailing, trying not to die when I tripped over a root, and so so I guess before we move on, what really pulled you into being so hyper focused on the pliability, the mobility, the strength kind of thought process, or I guess that would be what you would call it. Like, is that something that, you just kind of, over time, you just kind of evolved, or was there a moment where it was a snap and you thought, I need to start doing this. This needs to be something that I need to be focused on?
I really started to focus on it right before I turned 40. I'd always lifted weights. I grew up in the Midwest, Missouri, in the 80s, and played 4 sports a year, and football and baseball and basketball and track and field. And we had a really good strength training program when I was in high school. We were on the Nebraska Cornhuskers football team's strength training program since from 8th grade through senior year of high school. So we were lifting, full body weights from like 14 to 18. I was on that. And then I went to college and continued to lift weights because I was very comfortable in a traditional weight room. And so I continued to like strength train and got into mountain biking, but I still lifted. And then got into climbing in my 20s and kept mountain biking in my 20s. And I kept lifting a little bit, but I kind of fell off the horse for about 7 or 8 years, where I didn't lift very consistently. I would every once in a while, and then I fall off the horse. And then I got into it in my 30s to fix some. I worked with a strength training coach in 2004 and 2005 in the off season. I was dealing with some like quad to hamstring muscle imbalances from cycling days, where my hamstrings were stronger than my quads, which should be the opposite. And when your quads are weak, especially vastus medialis, the lower muscle next to the knee, in your quad that will cause patella maltracking and patella tendonitis. And I was dealing with a lot of runner's knee type symptoms and IT band stuff. And I really started to work with that strength training coach to fix that issue. And that's probably when I really started to kind of re-embrace strength training regularly. And I bounced around trying to figure out what to do. You know, it took a lot of years of kind of on and off messing around, and really P90X, if anybody is familiar with like beachbody.com and P90X workouts, there's like P91, P92, 3. I really got into it, and in my late 30s, I started playing around with P90X, and it was too much of a time commitment, and that's what actually made me come up with Tough 21 was the influence of P90X, the full body workout, but doing it in a very consolidated, timed type of scenario that focused on range of motion, strength, basic strength, and some core work. So that's where that kind of that came from. And that's when I got into it. Was really my late 30s. I really started embracing it, and I've been very consistent for the last well over a decade now on strength training.
Well, it seems like it's definitely, you've got it honed in. So, you know, I guess moving on to kind of the last kind of, I guess you would say, portion of the questions I was really wanting to work with you on is, you know, you've accomplished so much, right? You're right behind Karl. You know, maybe, you know, hopefully, you know, you can pass him one day. Who knows?
No, there's no way. Karl's untouchable at this point. Like, he's like 4,600s he's won or whatever, 45, 46. I'm only at 23. So that's probably not gonna happen, but I'm satisfied with second. I'll just sit in second. I'm good with second.
You know what? You just got to start doing more, and you just start doing like those, you know, like, you know, just get in, just jump in as many as possible, and you know, you can just call in from each one and just tell them, hey, there's another one off the list. But you know, in saying that, you know, it comes a point in your time where, you know, you have to hit a point where, how do you keep challenging yourself? Is it with the FKTs? You know, I know you got Moab coming up, which is a totally different, out of your wheelhouse type of race format. You know, is this how you keep challenging? Is this how Jeff Brown?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the 200 is interesting to me. I've been coaching a lot of athletes to it. I coach Mike McKnight, so obviously he's a kind of 200-mile specialist, and I paced him for 70 miles for his course record at Moab 240 last year, the last 70. I got a good feel for pace and for like logistics a little bit. And so even though I've been coaching it to him, I hadn't had a firsthand experience with 200s yet. It was all conceptual. And so now I have, and I'm pacing him again at Cocodona next week. And so I'm really intrigued by that distance. And I think as you age, obviously you're not going to have your top end when you get older, but you can still be really smart and strong and make up for it in other ways, whether it's, you know, dialed nutrition or logistics or, you know, aid station efficiency or whatever it is. You can make up time in other ways. And I feel like that's where the 200s come in, and the longer FKTs, you know, the multi-day FKT is intriguing to me too. Now that I'm getting older, it's like I've got all this 22 years of experience of like logistics and being, you know, really dialed with like being efficient and knowing my body and knowing my nutrition and all those things. And I think that sets you up for success in like multi-day things. So multi-day things are definitely on the horizon for me. That's the next challenge, I think, as I get older, and especially when I can't compete at you know, 100 milers anymore or anything like that. That's probably where I'm going to go. because I love the sport and I don't really want to quit. And I still have the desire, even though I know I'm aging and my clock's ticking. Um, I still am motivated to perform and motivated to try to eke out more performance out of myself. So, yeah, I'll keep pushing.
Okay, so first off, dude, you came in. I'm looking at your results here. You came in fifth in Hard Rock last year, so it's not like you're like slumming it and doing bad or anything. I mean, like you're still competing at a pretty high level. I mean, I know it's not. You may not. It may not be like a W at Hard Rock, but I mean, top five at Hard Rock's still pretty damn solid. And I mean, so I mean, you're still running pretty strong. But that's something when you look, and so like I know who Jeff Browning is. I know all the stuff that you accomplished, and it's like going through and looking at all your races and stuff. And I was preparing it for what I was going to talk to you about, and I was thinking, what does a guy like Jeff, where's his head at? Like after like what is it? I mean, you've done Western States, you've done Hard Rock. I mean, you come out here on the East Coast, you're slaying these races out here on the East Coast. I mean, and I think that's what makes you really unique about the way you run, is because you're not like a West Coast guy. You do East Coast stuff just as much as you do West Coast stuff, and it's like you just like to challenge yourself all over the place. And I think that's
I
what
like new courses too. I do like I like the idea of a new challenge on a new course, and especially if it's aesthetically a cool course. Like Pinhoti 100 is a good example, right? Like it's a cool course. It's a point to point on the Pinhoti Trail. Like that's kind of aesthetically really cool. So, races like that, or like, for example, I've been twice to Blood Rock. I think David does a really good job with like, he cares about making it as hard as possible. And he puts blood, sweat, and tears into his races. And I think I'd like to support stuff like that, especially once I learn his philosophy behind the scenes. It makes me want to come back. That's why I came back, because he said, hey, I did a new course and it's got more climbing, and he's trying to sandwich as much climbing as he can into that course. And it was hard, I have to say. When I got done, I told my wife, like on the side, I was like, if David ever wants me to come back and offers me a place, remind me not to go, because it's so hard. It's so hard. It was so hard. I mean, I was really surprised at how much harder it was than 2019 when I went there, when it was a different course. You just realized that like you can, yeah, anyway, it's just, I really like hard courses too. I like vert courses. I like mountain courses. Those speak to me for sure. That's why I like the canyon. It's hard. I think the canyon's really interesting in that it's the inverse of every mountain run you ever do, right? It's, in a mountain race or mountain run, you always go uphill first, run a ridge line, and go downhill. And it's always the coldest up on the ridge line and windy, right? But in the canyon, it's the opposite. It's windy and gnarly up at top. You get down the bottom and it's hot. And then you run this long creek bed in this chasm up through the middle of it, and then go up to North Rim. Like it's just the complete opposite. You have to finish on an uphill. I think it's just it challenges you. I think that's one of the reasons it's such a good training ground too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's what, and I think that's what's unique about, like I said, what you do is you mix it up with the canyon stuff, and come out here to the East Coast, and us on the East Coast, we get a bad rap because we don't have those big ass mountains like you guys have out west. We're a lot more flatter out here, but we definitely have some hard running, as you
Yeah, you
know,
do.
because you've ran some courses. So well, I guess on that note, I guess I guess we'll wrap it on up here. I mean, this has been amazing. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your grand your grand run that you had where you got your FKT, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what you do out at Moab. It looks like what you have Hard Rock before Moab, so
Yep.
you get to go back out to Isn't Killian coming out to Hard Rock this year?
Yeah, I think Francois is coming back. Killian's coming. We've got a really deep field this year. I'm trying to think who else is in it. There's a couple other guys that are in it too that I'm drawing a blank on who they are. But we're gonna have a solid field. For me, I love hard rock, and I kind of have this dream of maybe finishing it 10 times. I have 5 finishes there. And then I would just volunteer from that point forward and leave and give a spot to someone else in the lottery. But I don't want 20 finishes or anything. 10 kind of sounds fun. Now that I'm going for my 6th, I'm like, it doesn't seem that far out to be able to do it. So I've never finished a 100-miler 10 times. I don't have any races where I've done 10 times. So that's the one I probably would want to be my 10. So long-term goal, maybe, and we'll see. We'll see if I get in the lottery again. But
I mean, you're definitely close to it. And then that Moab is going to be definitely cool to see what you do out there, because that's just something totally different for you. And I look forward to it. And I appreciate your time tonight and talking with me. And it's just so cool to talk to, like I tell people all the time, I can sit and talk to people about running all day long. I have to know when to stop talking on these interviews, or otherwise I would be sitting there for hours talking. I mean, like, I could sit and listen to Peter Mortimer talk about nutrition for like hours upon end, because it was just unbelievably fascinating. So I really appreciate it. Thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
So that's it for this week's episode. As always, there's going to be an audio version, a video version of this. And until the next one, I will see you on the trail.